Hey, this is Luke. Thought I would weigh in on the topic of growth-driven design teams and some ideas to kick around when you're thinking about developing your own team. Uh, the first thing I'll mention is that, in general, you'll probably want to keep the teams fairly small, generally 3 to 5 people. I think once you get too many cooks in the kitchen, you start losing productivity, and you're not able to kind of keep that agile, quick pace that you would with smaller teams. So with that being said, if the output of those 3 to 5 people, if the output exceeds what their capacity is, you could always develop 2 teams and have 2 pods for one particular client, but have them working on different stages or different funnel parts of the funnel. So one could be like an acquisition team, one could be a retention team, or something like that, but still keep the teams themselves small. Um, the other thing I would mention is it really shouldn't be by job description, or job title. I would avoid job titles at all costs, because the problem with job titles is it really silos that person and makes them feel like when we get to a certain point in the process that they're the only people that should be working. So for instance, if you have a developer and you get to the development phase, really they kind of feel like that's their phase, they're the only ones that should be working, and everyone else can just hang and sit back, and that's not the case. Everyone should be working at every single one of the phases. So instead of doing it based off of job title, do it based off of skill set. It's a little bit different, and especially the way you position it to the team, it's a little bit different. So you're going to look at the strengths and the skill set of the different people and figure out what strengths and skill sets you need to include in your pod. So there's kind of 3 overlying skill sets or personalities, I guess, character traits, I guess maybe is the best way to put it, that you would keep in mind for a growth-driven design team. And I think the first one is creative problem solving. And what I mean by that is when you take a look at what work when they think of a problem, they start from the challenge. They start from the problem and the challenge that the user's having and the problem and challenge the business has, and works a creative solution on how to solve that challenge, which ultimately is going to end up resulting in a bunch of outputs, a bunch of features or actions that they're going to be taking, tactics, but having it stem from the problem or challenge from the beginning versus just jumping right onto the features and saying like, oh, this is best practices, or though this is like what's the new hot thing in the industry, rather taking a step back and starting with the problem and trying to find creative ways to solve it. So that would be one. Now the other one, which is kind of a inverse to that, so it's kind of tricky because you need to find a balance within your team, is someone who's very methodical or analytical. So they have a very step-by-step approach, very process-oriented. They are very data-driven in terms of their decisions. They're not emotionally wrapped up into design or into particular suggestions. If the data shows that it's not what they were thinking, that they totally get that and can move on and not be emotionally tied to any previous decisions they've made. And then the third one is, I think, just a curiosity to learning. So curiosity to learn more about the user, curiosity to learn about new ways of doing things. So just kind of being hungry for always learning and always knowing that there's more you can learn and use that knowledge to improve. Now, in terms of specific skills that you would have for each person, or maybe not person, but specific skills that you would want within a pod, the first one would be like organization. So organization in the sense of maybe website management, running the experiments, doing all the documentation, scheduling meetings, coordinating with the client and things like that. So you can kind of think of it as a project manager, but not necessarily project manager in the sense that it's not a project, it's an ongoing retainer, but someone who's very like organized, so organization. And I think a second bucket of skills for the pod is, I guess, creative. marketing or strategy. So maybe strategy is the best word. So when you think of someone who can do copywriting, think about messaging, think about value prop, think about kind of the overarching funnel and how what you're working on and where you should be working and just kind of the overall strategy of things, along with like how does that tie into marketing and sales and everything that's going on in other parts of the business. So that would be a skill set. And then the last skill set is like a coder. So someone who is can design, someone who can do front-end development, do integrations. If you have some more complex back-end development, that's not maybe a requirement, but is a plus. So essentially someone who's good at those coding skills. If you don't have that in-house, that's someone you can freelance, that's someone you can outsource another agency to partner with. The only word of caution I have on that is make sure that you really set the expectations of how your team works in the process and kind of that like continuous cycle, and make sure you sync up with that outside third party so that they're on the same page. What you want to avoid is that you have your own way of doing things, they have their own way of doing things, and there's like a miscommunication and you lose efficiency because you're not coordinating efforts properly. So those are the skill sets. So like someone who's organized, someone who's like strategic and has a little bit of a marketing focus, and then someone who's more coding based. And that could be in a pod, that could be one person, right? So one person could have all of those specific skills. Most likely it probably won't be one person. You're going to be really good at one or the other, or so you may have two people that split those skills, or you may have three people, one for each one of those specific skills. But it's really about the skill set. And so what happens is when you get to specific phases in the cycle or in the process, you have whoever's skill, that's their skill set, that's like their bread and butter. They're the one who leads the charge on that particular phase. But yet everyone else is still pitching in. So when we get to the strategy phase, the coder can still, the person whose skill set is coder is still involved. They're still generating ideas. They're still trying to figure out creative ways to solve problems. But it may be the marketer or the strategist who's kind of leading the charge there. And then when you get to the develop phase, maybe the coder is the leading the charge there, but still using the marketer and the organizer to kind of keep the ball rolling and kind of do other tasks and have other viewpoints and other opinions and things like that along the way and help out. So it's kind of a collaborative effort, but you have one person, whoever's skill set that is leading the charge. The last thing I'll mention is, so that's a team of 3. If I were to build a team of 5, when I look at the cycle, the growth-driven design cycle, the 2 areas that I would ideally love to add more time into proportionately is the planning phase, where you can do a lot more user research and data analysis. So a lot more in the planning phase, and then I would do a lot more in the develop phase, so actually like building the stuff out, because if you're trying to complete action items off that wish list, you're going to need more bandwidth and more capacity to do that. So I would first add another developer, or coder, I guess you would say, someone who can do the design, the front-end dev, and kind of help out with those tasks of implementation. And then the other person I would add is someone, I guess you could call them, some people call them data scientists, just really someone who can dig into the numbers, not only run the experiments and know how to set up the experiments and experimental design side of things, but also dig through the other information that's going on, dig through the results of the experiments and interpret that, and figure out what progress you're making and where there may be where you really should be focusing your efforts based off of looking at the data. So that would be basically someone to run and lead the planning phase. That would kind of take that off of the organizer in the 3-person pod. So in the 5-person pod, you have organizer, you'd have kind of strategist, marketer, you'd have 2 coders, and you'd have data scientist or whatever, I guess, data-focused type of person who can run the experiments. So my 2 cents, just some ideas out there, not a right or wrong way, saying this is the right or the wrong way, but some things that come to mind. Would love you to comment below in the thread and keep the conversation going.